Long before written history, in the vast savannas of West Africa, a boy destined for greatness was born. Sundiata Keita, the Lion King of Mali. Mocked for his weakness as a child, he would rise to become one of the most powerful rulers in African history. This is the tale of courage, destiny, and the spirit that shaped a kingdom and inspired generations. Hit the subscribe button really quickly so we can begin the story. In the time when the baobab trees were young and the spirits still walked freely among mortals, there existed a kingdom called Niani, nestled in the heart of the Monde lands. The air there was thick with dust and destiny, and the griots sang songs that could make warriors weep and children dream of glory. It was here, in this place where earth met sky in endless golden waves, that our story begins. King Nearmaghan Konet ruled over Niani with wisdom and strength. His name alone could silence a room, and his presence commanded respect from the mightiest warriors to the smallest child. But despite all his power and all his wealth, the king carried a burden that weighed heavier than any crown. He had no son to inherit his throne, no heir to carry forward the legacy of his ancestors. The king had consulted the most powerful diviners, made offerings to the spirits, and prayed to the ancestors until his knees grew sore against the earth. But the heavens remained silent, and his first wife bore him only daughters, beautiful though they were. Then one day, when the harmattan winds blew hot from the north, two hunters appeared at the gates of Niani. They were covered in the dust of long travel, their clothes worn thin by sun and wind. But it was not their appearance that drew attention, it was what they brought with them. Between them walked a woman, hunched and twisted, her back bent like the branch of an ancient tree. Her face was marked by smallpox, her body misshapen and grotesque. She was, by any measure of that time, the ugliest woman anyone in Niani had ever seen. Her name was Sogolen Konde, and she carried within her womb a prophecy that would shake the foundations of empires. The hunters bowed low before King Nearmaghan and spoke words that seemed impossible. They told him that their divinations had revealed this woman to be the mother of the greatest king West Africa would ever know. They said that if he married her, she would bear him a son who would surpass all others, a child of destiny whose name would echo through the ages like thunder across the savannah. The king's first wife, Sasuma Barit, laughed when she heard these words. How could this twisted, ugly woman produce anything of value? How could she, beautiful and proud as she was, be made to share her husband with such a creature? But King Nearmaghan had learned long ago that destiny does not wear a beautiful face, and prophecy does not come wrapped in silk. He married Sogolen Konde, and despite her unwillingness and her sorrow, despite the mockery of the court and the rage of his first wife, the marriage was consummated. 9 months later, as the rains began to fall and the earth turned green with new life, Sogolen gave birth to a son. They named him Sundiata, which means, the Lion of the Monde. But the child who came into the world that day bore no resemblance to the king of beasts. Sundiata was born with legs that would not straighten, arms that seemed too heavy for his body. As the months turned to years, while other children began to crawl and then to walk, Sundiata remained on the ground, dragging himself through the dust like a serpent. His eyes were bright with intelligence, his spirit fierce and unbroken, but his body betrayed him at every turn. The whispers began almost immediately. The prophecy was false, they said. The hunters had been charlatans, and Sogolen had tricked the king. Sasuma Barite's son, Dankaran Tuman, grew strong and tall, walking and running while Sundiata could only watch from where he sat in the dirt. The first wife's triumph seemed complete. Where is your lion now? Sasuma would taunt Sogolen as she passed. I see only a slug that crawls in the dust. My son will be king, and yours will beg for scraps at his table. Sogolen bore these insults with a mother's pain, her tears falling like rain upon the earth. She would hold her son in the night and feel his strong heart beating against her chest, knowing that somewhere inside this broken body lived the spirit of a king. But knowing and seeing are different things, and the years passed with cruel slowness. Sundiata endured. He watched the other children play their games of war, pretending to be great hunters and mighty warriors. He listened to the griots sing of ancient heroes who could uproot trees and defeat entire armies. And deep within his chest, where no one else could see, a fire began to burn. When Sundiata was 7 years old, his father, King Nearmaghan, fell ill. The king knew his time was short, and he called his son to him. Sundiata dragged himself to his father's bedside, pulling his useless legs behind him, and looked into the dying king's eyes. "My son," the old king whispered, his voice weak as wine through dry grass. "Do not let them tell you who you are. The path of your destiny is not straight, and it will not be easy. But you are my son, and you carry within you the power of all our ancestors. Rise, Sundiata. When the time comes, you will rise." 3 days later, King Neamakhan Kone died, and Dankaran Tuman was crowned king. Sasuma Berite's victory seemed absolute. She wasted no time in making life unbearable for Sogolen and her son. She gave them the smallest hut in the compound, the poorest portions of food. She made certain that every day brought new humiliation. One afternoon, Sasuma sent a messenger to mock Sogolen, saying that even her servants were stronger than Sogolen's son, for they at least could walk to the garden and pluck leaves for the evening stew. The insult cut deeper than any blade, and Sogolen wept bitter tears. But Sundiata heard his mother's crying, and something inside him finally broke free. "Mother," he said, his voice carrying a strength that made Sogolen look up in wonder. "Bring me the iron rod that the blacksmiths made for me. Today, I will walk." The blacksmiths had forged an iron staff years before, at the king's command, a rod so heavy that 6 men struggled to carry it. It had been meant to help Sundiata stand, but he had never been strong enough to use it. Now, as Sogolen watched with trembling hands pressed to her mouth, her son called for that impossible weight. They brought the iron rod and laid it before Sundiata. The boy placed his hands upon it, and every muscle in his body tensed like rock pulled taut. The earth itself seemed to hold its breath. Birds stopped singing. The wind ceased its constant whisper. Sundiata pulled himself up. His arms shook with the effort. His legs, which had never known the burden of his weight, trembled like leaves in a storm. Sweat poured down his face, and his jaw clenched so tight that blood appeared on his lips. But inch by inch, moment by moment, Sundiata rose. And then, with a sound like thunder rolling across the heavens, Sundiata stood. The iron rod bent beneath his grip, twisted like soft clay in the hands of a child. The impossible had become possible. The crippled boy had become something more. But standing was not enough. Sundiata took one step, then another. His walk was uncertain at first, like a newborn foal finding its legs. But with each step, strength flowed into his limbs. With each breath, power filled his chest. By the time he reached his mother's garden, Sundiata was not merely walking, he was striding like a king. He did not pick leaves for his mother's stew. He gripped the great baobab tree that grew in the center of the garden, that ancient tree whose roots ran deeper than memory, and he pulled. The earth groaned. The sky seemed to spin. And the baobab tree, that symbol of permanence and power, came free from the ground in an explosion of soil and severed roots. Sundiata carried the tree to his mother's door and planted it there as a gift, a promise, and a warning to all who had mocked them. The news of Sundiata's miracle spread through Niani like wildfire through dry grass. Some rejoiced, remembering the prophecy. Others feared, knowing that Dankaran Tuman's throne had just become very uncertain. But Sasuma Berit did not rejoice, and she did not simply fear, she plotted. She whispered poison into her son's ear, telling him that Sundiata would surely kill him and take the throne. She reminded him of the prophecy, of the hunter's words, of the destiny that hung over them all like a storm cloud waiting to break. And Dankaran Tuman, who was weak where his half-brother was strong, listened. The assassins came in the night, moving through shadows like smoke. But Sundiata had learned from his years on the ground to notice things that others missed, the slight sound of leather on stone, the smell of metal and malice. He was gone before the blades could find him, vanished into the darkness with his mother and his sister. Sogolen and her children fled Niani, becoming wanderers in the vast lands of West Africa. For years they traveled, moving from kingdom to kingdom, seeking shelter and finding only temporary refuge. Sundiata grew strong in exile, his body finally matching the strength of his spirit. He learned the ways of war from the warriors who would train him. He learned the ways of leadership from the kings who would host him. And he learned patience from the long, dusty roads that seemed to lead nowhere. Meanwhile, in the lands they had left behind, darkness was rising. A sorcerer king named Sumaro Kante had been building his power in the kingdom of Soso. He was a man who had long ago traded his humanity for magical power, a ruler who wore human bones as jewelry and kept the skins of his enemies as trophies. His medicine was strong, they said, so strong that no weapon could pierce his flesh, no arrow could find his heart. Sumaro descended upon the Monde kingdoms like a plague. One by one, the great cities fell. Niani was conquered, and Dankaran Tuman fled into exile, tasting the same bitter medicine he had forced upon his half-brother. The Monde people cried out for a savior, but none appeared. The griots sang songs of the ancient prophecy, of the Lion King who would deliver them, but their words seemed like empty hope against Sumaro's terrible reality. Then, word reached the exiles. A delegation of the surviving Monde nobles found Sundiata in the kingdom of Ghana, where he had been living under the protection of its king. They prostrated themselves before him and begged him to return, to fulfill his destiny, to save his people from the terror of Sumaro Kante. Sundiata looked at these men who represented the kingdom that had rejected him, the people who had mocked his weakness, the nobles who had stood silent while his family was driven into exile. A lesser man might have turned away. A lesser man might have savored the sweetness of their desperation. But Sundiata was not a lesser man. He was his father's son, and he remembered his father's final words. Destiny was calling, and though the path had been neither straight nor easy, he was ready to answer. I will return, Sundiata said, and his voice carried the weight of thunder. Gather all who will fight. Send word to every warrior, every hunter, every man with courage in his heart. We will face Sumaro Kante, and we will reclaim our homeland. The army that gathered was unlike any that had been seen before in those lands. Warriors came from every corner of the Monde territories. The smiths forged weapons day and night, and the drums sent messages across hundreds of miles. Old alliances were renewed, and new bonds were forged in the fire of shared purpose. But everyone knew that conventional warfare would not be enough. Sumaro's magic was too powerful, his medicine too strong. Arrows bounced off his skin, spears shattered against his chest. He seemed invincible, a demon wearing human form. Sundiata sought counsel from the wise ones, from the diviners and the griots who held the ancient knowledge. They told him that every power has a weakness, every magic has a counter. Sumaro's strength came from a sacred chamber where he kept his totems and fetishes, and somewhere in that chamber lay the secret of his power. A spy was sent, a woman of great courage who allowed herself to be captured and taken to Sumaro's palace. She was clever and beautiful, and she used both qualities to gain the sorcerer king's confidence. In the darkest hours of night, she explored his forbidden chamber and discovered his secret. Sumaro's power could be broken by the spur of a white rooster. Such a simple thing, so mundane and ordinary, yet it was the key to breaking the greatest magical power in West Africa. The woman escaped and brought this knowledge to Sundiata, though it cost her dearly. The armies met on the plains of Karina, and the earth trembled with the thunder of their approach. Sumaro rode at the head of his forces, confident in his invincibility, amused by the audacity of these rebels who dared to challenge him. He had crushed so many before them. What made this any different? The battle raged for hours. Men fell like grain before the scythe. Blood turned the dry earth to mud. And through it all, Sumaro stood untouched, his laughter echoing across the battlefield as weapons broke against his enchanted flesh. Then Sundiata appeared before him, mounted on a great horse, his presence commanding silence even in the chaos of battle. He held in his hand an arrow, and upon that arrow's tip was fastened the spur of a white rooster. Your reign ends today, Sumaro, Sundiata declared, his voice carrying across the field. You have forgotten that all power has a price, and all magic has a key. He drew his bow and released the arrow. It flew straight and true, guided by destiny and determination. The spur struck Sumaro's shoulder, and for the first time, the sorcerer king felt pain. His invincibility shattered like pottery dropped on stone. The magic that had sustained him fled like shadows before the sun. Sumaro, realizing his doom, fled the battlefield, and his army, seeing their invincible leader brought low, scattered in terror. The victory at Kerina echoed across West Africa like the ringing of a great bell. Kingdom after kingdom that had been conquered by Sumaro threw off their chains and pledged allegiance to Sundiata. The Monde lands were free, but freedom alone was not enough. Sundiata understood something that many warriors never grasped, that true strength lies not in conquest but in creation. He gathered the leaders of all the Monde peoples and forged them into something greater than they had been before. He created the Mali Empire, with laws that protected the weak and elevated the worthy. He established the Kurukanfuga, a charter of rights and responsibilities that would govern the empire for generations. Under his rule, Niani became a great city once more. Trade routes stretched across the Sahara, bringing wealth and knowledge. Scholars came to study, merchants came to trade, and the empire flourished like a garden after the rains. The boy who could not walk became the man who built an empire. The child who was mocked became the king who was legendary. Sundiata ruled for many years, and his justice became famous across the known world. He never forgot his years of weakness, his time in exile, the long journey from the dust to the throne. Because of this, he was merciful to the weak and stern with the strong. He understood that true leadership meant serving the people, not being served by them. The griots sang his praises, and their songs would echo through the centuries. They sang of the crippled boy who stood, of the exiled prince who returned, of the warrior who defeated sorcery with wisdom. They sang of Sundiata, the Lion King of Mali, whose roar still echoes across the savannah. And when at last Sundiata's time came to join his ancestors, when his spirit was called to walk among the stars, the empire he had built did not crumble. It grew stronger still, lasting for centuries, its influence spreading across West Africa and beyond. The Empire of Mali became one of the wealthiest and most powerful kingdoms in the medieval world, its cities centers of learning and culture, its name synonymous with prosperity and justice. But the true legacy of Sundiata was not measured in gold or territory. It was measured in hope, the hope that weakness can become strength, that destiny cannot be denied, that a single person with courage can change the world. The story of Sundiata Keita has been passed down through generations, told by griots around fires, sung in ceremonies, whispered to children as they sleep. It is more than history. It is a living thing, a reminder that our beginnings do not determine our endings, that our struggles can become our strengths, that the path to greatness is rarely straight but always possible. In every person who has been told they are too weak, too small, too broken to achieve their dreams, the spirit of Sundiata lives on. In every community that rises from oppression to build something beautiful, his legacy continues. In every leader who remembers that power is given not to dominate but to serve, his wisdom endures. The dust of the savannah still carries his name on the wind. The baobab trees stand as monuments to his strength. And the Mali Empire he founded, though long ago fallen into history, remains forever etched in the memory of Africa and the world. This is the tale of Sundiata Keita, the Lion King of Mali, a story of how destiny fulfilled itself through the most unlikely vessel, how greatness emerged from suffering, and how one man's courage shaped the fate of nations. The obstacles that seem insurmountable today are often the very forces shaping you into who you're meant to become. Your struggles are not your ending, they are your preparation. Every setback is teaching you what you need to know for the triumph ahead. The world may see weakness, but destiny sees possibility. Stand when you're told you never walk. Rise when they say you never succeed. Your story is not written by those who mock you, it's written by the strength you find within yourself when everything seems impossible. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more inspiring stories. See you next time.